Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined on this Tuesday morning by Chris Welsh and by Andrew Erickson. Fellas, it is the new late season format for our show. Obviously, trade deadlines are well in the past for almost every single fantasy league out there. So we are no longer talking buys and sells on our Tuesday show. We are not going away. We are going to be talking predictions for the week. These are not necessarily bold predictions. They can be bolder if you guys so choose, but they are just predictions in general paired with some player props that we like going into the week ahead. Kind of an early look at the way we see the week playing out. Erickson, you and I did the show with Joey P last year. We've got Welsh in it this year. We're going to have some fun. Again, the same trio that you guys have been, come to expect on Tuesdays throughout the season, just a different format for the show here for the last handful of weeks. Welsh, does that make sense?
I'm in. I'm good. Go team and break.
And break.
Team Fantasy Pros.
team Fantasy Pros. Before we dive into the new show, we are going to do what we usually do on Tuesdays, which is react to Monday Night Football. Guys, I was at this game, Broncos, Browns, 41-32 victory for Denver. I was at this game. It was my first game actually at Empower Field, the Denver Stadium. Super cool stadium, super fun experience. What a wild game to be at, honestly. Jameis Winston, 58 pass attempts, 497 yards. He threw 4 touchdowns to his own team, 2 touchdowns to the other team. Jerry Jeudy also 9 catches, 235 yards, and a touchdown. David Njoku, 52 yards and 2 touchdowns. Guys, David Njoku had 17 targets. In fact, 3 Browns players had 13 plus targets each. Just remarkable stuff. Also, the Broncos won this game. Julian McLaughlin, 14 carries, 84 yards. Bo Nix, just under 300 passing yards. He had a touchdown, 2 interceptions as well. Marvin Mims had the 93-yard touchdown. I'm just reading through all the different box score stuff because they're all kind of crazy. Erickson, what was your number one takeaway from watching this game?
Just you have to expect the unexpected when it comes to Jameis Winston. His style of play is different from every other quarterback. And it's weird to say that he is basically matchup proof because he creates his own type of fantasy appeal because he drops back to throw. He throws more aggressively than seemingly any other quarterback in the NFL. So it doesn't matter what opponent he's playing. He's going to get his guys fantasy points one way or another. And yeah, so it's crazy to just look at what he's able to do. Again, 6 total touchdowns, 2 to the other team, 4 to his own team. But he's able to, just with this pass heavy aggressiveness of this offense, you're getting a lot of fantasy production. So even players that miss this game, like Cedric Tillman, he still has appeal rest of season because Jameis Winston's his quarterback. Elijah Moore has appeal. Jerry Jeudy obviously has been fantastic since Winston took over a couple weeks ago. So yeah, have faith in some of these Browns. And really, it doesn't matter who they're playing because as long as Jameis Winston's under center, he's going to create game environments where you're going to get fantasy points. So you saw that obviously play out almost every single week that he started this year, except for one, I think it was the game against the Chargers, really was his only bad game. But yeah, have faith in these Browns the rest of the way.
Welsh, Jerry Jeudy is wide receiver 34 in our consensus rest of season rankings. The last 5 games, he has double-digit scoring in each game. He's got one 20-point game, another now 36-point game. Obviously, this is the best of the bunch, but he's been playing really well, like Erickson alluded to. Should he be ranked higher in rest of season wide receiver rankings?
100%. Yeah. What's funny is Cedric Tillman just got the instant boost off of one game, and he, every single week was 24, 23, somewhere between 20 and 24, low end wide receiver 2. It should be Jeudy. And we've kind of been talking about this for a couple weeks now, that it's hey, first off, Cedric Tillman is not the be all end all because all 3 of those wide receivers would get, 8+ targets, but it has clearly shown itself now, and it's no mystery to anybody. Jerry Jeudy is the number 1 target, and he's actually showing off some of those rookie skills. I remember Bogman and I have this long-standing thing. I wanted the 49ers in that draft to take Jerry Jeudy. They had an opportunity. They traded out to get Kinlaw, and then they also took Brandon Ayuk later. But I love Jerry Jeudy coming out of college because he was just this phenomenal route runner and just a really great receiver. And it's taken a long time, but he's finding ways to do it deep. The separation, Jameis Winston is just sometimes looks like he's just closing his eyes and just boom, and then just, it gets to Jeudy, but Judy's getting a massive amount of targets. So I really do think, if you are still alive and Jerry Jeudy is on your roster, he's going to have to push that wide receiver 2, 3, and some tougher decisions and some tougher questions are going to come up about starting Jerry Jeudy over said player. I mean, we might get into like the teens of wide receivers that you legitimately might want to consider Jerry Jeudy off of pure volume, because like this Patrick Surtain and this defense wasn't something we were going to predict. A guy like Jerry Jeudy is going to go over 200. He absolutely torched him, probably also because they didn't do like located single coverage on Surtain on Jeudy the entire game. They kept messing around with it. But yeah, Jerry Jeudy is definitely a fantasy force through the rest of the year.
Where do you think he should be ranked, Erickson, rest of the season? His finishing schedule at Pittsburgh, home for Kansas City, at Cincinnati, home for Miami, and then at Baltimore, but that's week 18.
I mean, I think that he's probably a wide receiver 2 rest of the season. I think the thing that's important to point out with Jeudy is that all the usage is kind of the same for all these Browns players, right? Like they're all seeing a lot of targets. Like there really isn't one that's standing out aside from Jeudy because of he's just the one that's made the most of his opportunities, and give credit to him for that. Like he's the one that's making and converting the majority of his targets. Like in this game, like he didn't even lead the team in targets, right? And Njoku had 17 targets. Elijah Moore had more targets than him.
I was gonna say he wasn't even top 2 in targets,
right? So you don't even think about that because of obviously, he caught the 70-yard touchdown. He should have had another touchdown that Jameis Winston overthrew him on, but I mean, they're just vibing right now. And we saw it last year with these Browns receivers obviously thriving post Deshaun Watson. We're seeing it again. So I think maybe with Tillman coming back, I think that maybe does shave off a little bit. But if Winston's going to drop back to throw 50 times, it doesn't matter where you are in the pecking order, right? Because double-digit targets are double-digit targets. It's one of these things where we're always talking about like target share, right? A percentage of a player's in their offense. Well, the Browns offense is completely different than every other offense because Jameis Winston's quarterback. So you kind of have to look at the target share with a grain of salt and be like, well, it doesn't really matter because they all see double-digit targets because they're always throwing the ball 50 times per game. So unless we get a really weird game script where the Browns are up and then decide to feed Nick Chubb, like I just don't see that. That's not the identity of this offense. They really haven't shown that at all. And even earlier this year, I think in the matchup against the Saints, where we talked about, hey, this is a good spot for Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb got like stuffed on the first play on 4th down, and then they immediately just decided not to run the ball the rest of the game, and then they just started throwing it. So they want to throw the ball. So it really matters what the target share is.
They throw so much, they made Nick Chubb viable as a receiver.
Nick Chubb caught a touchdown.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's amazing.
Can you guys ever remember a game where 3 players had 13 plus targets? I just can't believe that. I can't think of a time.
Honestly, you probably have to look at the Jameis Winston game log. I'm sure that there's ones with Deshaun Jackson, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin where you can find 13 plus targets across the board. That's probably just look at the Jameis Winston game logs.
Just quickly, Welsh, before we get off this game, because we really mainly focus on the Browns, anything on the Denver side that you thought was notable or relevant for fantasy purposes? I mean, obviously the big play to Marvin Mims, he didn't really do much else besides the 93-yard touchdown. Cortland Sutton over 100 yards again, 9 targets, 6 catches, 102 yards. And then Jaleel McLaughlin, like I mentioned, it was his turn. He spun the roulette wheel, and now it's McLaughlin's turn to lead the backfield in touches by a wide margin, 14 carries, 84 yards. Anything stand out to you there?
I mean, I would say that should have been like a final nail in a coffin to prove that you will never start the right Denver Broncos running back. You should never do it. And I mean, I say that and I understand it's like, you got the bye. Well, I think they're on bye. So you got Bye-Pocalypse, so they wouldn't even be the option. But it's like in a Bye-Pocalypse situation would be it. But no one's going to go out there. I will say this, though, on Denver as well. I was sweating that. I almost text you to help you intervene there, Worm, because both of my FFPCs came down to this game. And Will Lutz's last field goal, I wanted you to throw things on the field. That cost me minimum $500. That kick.
You need to tackle the Broncos kicker.
That was a $500 kick that killed me minimum. But luckily, Cortland Sutton. I mean, Bo Nix didn't look quite himself there, but boy, in a game where I was sweating Cortland Sutton, luckily I moved on and I was able. I mean, in the championship for that. But like I was sweating Cortland Sutton. Every target was just Sutton deep, incomplete. Bo Nix wasn't on his stuff, but Sutton is still absolutely the top guy. Really. Just a great option in general. Had a great game. Could have probably been a lot better if a couple of those deep options were hit and there's a big pass interference call. But Cortland Sutton, to me, is just becoming an absolute stud. Is a stud. Bo Nix has kind of unlocked him, and I think he's a great option for the rest of the year, as a top-end wide. He's probably going to rank top 12 rest of season just solely because of Nix.
I was up in the nosebleeds for my seats, so it would have been taking
throw really hard
to get down there. Yeah,
just throw something really hard, please.
Yeah, as hard as I can. All right, let's look at some predictions here for Week 14. So the way we're going to do this is you guys each have 5 predictions, and they're kind of paired with the player prop for the week, and we are going to go 5-1 for each of you, roughly the order, getting towards the one you like most. You like all of your picks, obviously. That's why you're picking these. Erickson, let's start with your number 5 prediction for week 14.
The Packers and Lions is going to be a shootout on Thursday night football, playing in the Dome, Coors Field, Ford Field of the NFL. So I'm excited about this matchup. I think that last week in the Lions game should have gone over the total, because all the Bears have to do is kick a field goal, and we're swimming in the over, because it go to overtime. It's going to score over 46 points, and it would have been great for me, especially. But the majority of games when the Lions play at home go over 50 points. If you look at 8 of their last 12 home games have actually gone over the projected total by Vegas. So yes, you want to be firing up as many Packers and Lions as possible. And I think that an interesting look at this game, you look at the Lions, their defense is really banged up. They have a lot of injuries. The injuries are starting to pile up for them. Now, back when they lost Aiden Hutchinson, that didn't really affect them based on the matchups. They started blitzing more, and they weren't really seeing a downgrade in terms of their pass rush. But as injuries continue to mount, it's harder to replace these key players that they continue to miss week in and week out. And I think the Packers, who are not going to get Romeo Doubs back, I think the Packers can take advantage of the Lions defense. So I want to be firing up Packers and Lions players, especially with all these teams on bye. Some of these fringier Packers receivers like Christian Watson. I like these players to have big games in these types of spots. So that's kind of my look at this particular game on Thursday night. When it comes to the prop, I think that Jahmyr Gibbs and Montgomery are both going to find the end zone, because last week was one of the first times all season that they didn't both score in the same game. They've scored in the same game 9 times this season. 9. And Gibbs almost scored if he had not fumbled the ball. So I think that we're going to see them both get back in the end zone. So firing up your Lions running backs like you've been doing all season long. We're going to see a shootout Thursday night, over on the total. Anytime touchdowns for Gibbs and Montgomery. So yeah, that's my prediction for week 14.
One of the best games on the slate. Welsh, do you see it playing out the same way?
Yeah, and there's a lot of just fantasy equity that's going to be in this game as well. Jaden Reed saved me last week, and the Lions injury. It's funny that you're bringing this up. We're turning this into a betting pro show. But on the Lions front, by the way, Coach of the Year call plus 120 for Dan Campbell right now. And I was like, that seems like that's stealing money at this point. I'm surprised. I mean, I know Tomlin is right there, but a bet on the bet side that I'm going to get into. But yeah, I think there's fantasy assets across the board. Anyone that you would consider in starting, you're starting in this game. So I agree.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching that one. No disagreements here. Welsh, what is your number 5 prediction?
All right, we're going to start with the tight ends. Tight ends are wonky. We're having to come to terms with guys like Kyle Pitts. It's funny, we're going to talk about him later, but he should be cut. He should be out. He shouldn't be on your roster. You're probably not playing or doing anything of importance if you have Kyle Pitts still on your roster. Taysom Hill just went down with an injury. That was like a top 5 or 6 tight end. So we are looking at an alternative, and Juwan Johnson, the tight end that was promised for this week. Yes, because we also are without, Mark Andrews and a handful of other tight ends with the Bipocalypse. We are going to jump in to this Saints and Giants game, which actually has a lot. Erickson took one that I 100% would have put down. It's my favorite thing of the week. We'll talk about in a bit, but you've got these offenses where the Saints are the worst against receivers over the last month in fantasy points. The Giants are the second worst against running backs in fantasy points over the last month. So this could be a messy game that is going to open up some opportunities. But this one for Juwan Johnson, I really like him to set some highs. 5 catches, which I think would tie the season high in yards, and a potential score. Now, the Giants do shut down tight ends in general a little bit, but Juwan Johnson received 7 targets last week when Taysom Hill went down. In week 12, as Taysom went down, Juwan Johnson, 26% first read percentage and worked 40% out of the slot. So I don't care to look at what tight end numbers look like against the Giants. I'm going to look at wide receivers because they've got nobody. So this is one of those games from a prediction standpoint, you're going to get weird name dudes that are going to get you production. When you're dealing with the Bipocalypse and you got a bunch of guys you've never heard of, you're like Cedric Wilson, this is the game that's going to do it because A, the Giants, not good, and B, there's just no one else there. That's why MVS is viable. Kamara is the number 1 play. That's why Juwan Johnson's going to be viable. So I think Juwan Johnson is going to be more than a streaming tight end option. He's going to have a pretty big game, and his receiving yard prop is going to open up too low. So we're going to take the over on that. Juwan Johnson getting targets, getting receptions. He is the tight end that is promised going into your playoffs.
Erickson, what do you think about this one? I mean, it's still a little early in the week for your weekly rankings. Looks like D-Rose got him around tight end 21, Fitz tight end 19. So they're still fairly low on them. Where do you think you're going to end up with him, Erickson?
Probably in that range. I'm probably going to have to talk to Fitz about Juwan Johnson because I know Fitz is not a huge fan of Juwan Johnson from what we've talked about him in the past. So I've been the one that's been like pro Juwan Johnson, and obviously it hasn't worked out at any point this season. But he's kind of doing what he did last year, where I remember I had Juwan combining his two names into one. Juwan Johnson, he started out the season really bad last year too, and then towards the end of the year, he started to kind of cook a little bit as he got more opportunities in the offense. Every time I listen to a Saints broadcast, they just rave about Juwan Johnson. They talk about how the coaches love him. And Rizzy, we need to find a new guy to love, right? Because Taysom Hill, he's out for the year. So they need to find someone else. And again, they're just running out of bodies to get the ball to. I mean, Dante Pettis, are they going to sign some? I mean, they're going to bring back Michael Thomas? Like at this point, like I don't know what the Saints are going to do. So Juwan Johnson, yeah, the matchup's not ideal, but it's hard to argue with him not being the top of the tight end streaming du jour this week, given all the bye weeks. I know I'm in a spot where, you know who my two tight ends were? Hunter Henry and Dallas Goedert. You know who neither are playing this week? Dallas Goedert and Hunter Henry. So I'm looking at Juwan Johnson on my waivers. It's like, well, it's either going to be him or Grant Calcaterra. Like those are my top two options this week. So Welsh, I hope you're right.
But by the way, we've alluded to the bye weeks a couple of times. Let me actually read the teams that are on bye this week, just in case you weren't aware. It's the Ravens, the Broncos, the Texans, the Colts, the Patriots, and the Commanders. That is a lot of fantasy.
It's not just the bye week. It's Bipocalypse.
It is and I hate that the NFL is doing this in week 14.
It's the dumbest thing ever.
It's absolutely insane. I'm in some leagues where the fantasy playoffs start this week, just because there's only 3 weeks after this left, if you don't include week 18. So it's most.
How many teams are in your? How many teams are making the playoffs in that league?
It's a 6-team playoff, but they like to do the 2-week championship round, and it has pushed this into week 14. I mean, it's just insane that the NFL has 60 because I think last year there was a week 14 bye, but it was only 2 teams, if I'm remembering correctly.
Sounds about right. They could do it if they wanted to start in week 5. You could do like 4 teams every single week and end in week 12. I think they should be done by week 12 with the bye weeks.
They're trying to give the content providers like us a little bit of a break after last week's sprint where we had to do 5 days of work in 3 days. So I think, hey. Yeah.
I think last year the Commanders also were week 14. Yeah, I'm looking up here. Commanders and Cardinals were the only 2 last year. So they decided 2 wasn't enough here in week 14. We needed 6 teams on bye. So that's who it is. Again, Baltimore, Houston, New England, Washington, Indianapolis, and Denver. Erickson, let's go to your number 4 prediction.
Kirk Cousins, revenge game. He's going to win on the road in the house that he built in Minnesota. Kirk Cousins is going to come away with the win. People are basically already saying that Michael Penix is going to start. It's over for Kirk Cousins. Exactly all the same narratives that after Kirk Cousins was horrible in week 1, basically the exact same thing. And then Kirk Cousins was fine after that. So I think that we're getting a much overreaction to the Kirk Cousins, his abysmal game last year, getting through 4 interceptions, pick 6. Again, he wasn't great, but this is what Kirk Cousins does, right? Like he has bad games where he implodes and then he bounces back and then he's fine. So I think that he's kind of a sneaky play this week against the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, he's on the road, but going back to, hey, this is another defense that's kind of banged up. Ivan Pace, as Fitz pointed out astutely last week, did not play against the Arizona Cardinals. And what did the Cardinals be able to do? They were able to run the ball decently effectively. You know who also got hurt last week? Stephon Gilmore. And once Stephon Gilmore got hurt, what happened? Marvin Harrison went in and caught a touchdown, right? So you're starting to see some of these Vikings pieces on this defense. They're starting to lose some of these guys. So I don't think the defense is necessarily going to be as effective as they would if they had all their players. And you look at Minnesota as a whole over the last 4 weeks, they give up a lot of volume. Like that's really what their MO is. Like you face a lot of you get a lot of opportunities for pass attempts because the Vikings can score offensively as well. We know the Falcons defense is horrible. Like I expect Sam Darnold is a better start than Kirk Cousins this week, especially because he's playing at home. So the Vikings are definitely going to score points on Atlanta. And I think that means you're going to get Kirk Cousins with a lot of dropbacks, and that's going to give him opportunities to throw for a lot of yards. I mean, he still has a ton of weapons with Mooney and Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson out of the backfield. Look at the last 4 weeks, the Vikings, 5th in pass attempts and 5th in passing yards allowed through the air. You look at the 3 quarterbacks that they've played last 3 weeks. Kyler Murray, 260 passing yards. Caleb Williams, 340 passing yards. Will Levis, 295 passing yards. None of these quarterbacks were looked at, oh, like this is a great spot against the Vikings. And what do they all do? They over exceeded expectations. And you know whose expectations are rock bottom this week? It's Kirk Cousins. Everyone is like, no, Kirk Cousins, he's horrible. He can never do anything ever again, even though he's been fine in plus matchups all year. Again, Chargers are a good defense. And then before their bye week, they face Denver on the road. Yes, Kirk Cousins is not Jameis Winston. Okay, he was never going to be able to do what Jameis Winston did, except the pick sixes. But I think that Kirk Cousins is kind of being underrated a little bit here. I think that this game could be a shootout, which is why I kind of like his prospects potentially in fantasy football, especially with all the bye weeks. I get it's a tough click for Kirk Cousins just based on how bad he was last week, but he's up and down. One of his best games against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year came after one of his worst games of the year. And I remember writing up, like, I don't know if I can trust Kirk Cousins this week against this blitz-heavy defense. And what did he do? He absolutely ripped apart the blitz with all of his weapons. So leave a light on for Kirk Cousins. I think that they can come away with the win here. And when it comes to Kyle Pitts, man.
Don't do it.
Wait, no, okay, Welsh. So let me ask you, I think it was a show. I'm not sure. I think it was Scott Pianowski, right? You guys did a show earlier this year, I think, with Pianowski, and he buried Kyle Pitts, right? And then what did Kyle Pitts do immediately that week? He went on.
Probably something. Okay. So would that be 90% of his production for the year or just 80% in that game?
I'm just saying it happened in the same week where Kirk Cousins, everyone was like, oh, this guy, you can't use him. He's buried. You can't use this guy. I just think that this is a classic case of, well, it's fantasy football, right? That's what I'm looking at this Kyle Pitts. He has one catch the last 2 weeks or the last 2 games.
Well, good thing is he should be available on the wire for everybody, and you could go and pick him up if you really want to. I'll take Juwan Johnson over Kyle Pitts.
Oh, you want that?
100%.
I'll take Kyle Pitts.
100%.
Give me Kyle Pitts over Juwan Johnson. Yeah, I'll take. I've been disappointed enough by Juwan Johnson throughout the years. I bet Fitz will agree with me on Kyle Pitts.
He doesn't like Juwan Johnson, so he's biased. So he doesn't count. Null and void.
Erickson? Kyle Pitts had 4 catches for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns in that week 8 game against Tampa. Since then, week 8, he has 6 total catches, and 4 of them came in the same game against New Orleans. Outside of that game, since week 8, he has 2 catches.
Wait, say that one more time for me. Run that last stat for me one more time.
If you take out the game against New Orleans, which he only had 4 catches for 55 yards, since week 8, he has 2 catches.
I'll take Juwan Johnson.
They both had 2 red zone targets last week. So who throws more touchdowns this week? Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins? Think about that.
I'll simmer on that.
Setting aside Welsh, the Kyle Pitts of it all, what do you think about Erickson's main prediction here on Kirk Cousins? 300 yards, 3 touchdowns as a prop, revenge game narrative. What do you think about him here?
Yeah, I'm a sucker for revenge game narratives. I've got at least one. I'm looking at my predictions. We're going to do one here in a second. So I love me some revenge narratives. I also do think, like with Cousins, classic bounce back spot. I mean, it was the worst game ever. He's going to come back in. He'll be efficient. I like this offense. I don't like Kyle Pitts, but I love Bijan. I love Drake London. Mooney is going to get more involved. Like I think Mooney is the one that, everyone's like, oh, I don't know. And I think we'll get a lot of questions about wanting to start him. I think he's going to be able to the guy that's going to be able to go off. That defensive scheme can get really tough, but I think you can beat them a little bit in the secondary. So I'm very cool with the Kirk Cousins side of this. I think he'll be sitting on a lot of benches, and you can leave a light on, a couple cookies, and a nice glass of milk for Kirk Cousins.
But none for Kyle Pitts.
No. Kyle Pitts, Cole, the Grinch, get him out, send him back to Whoville.
The NFL season is rolling along. The contenders separating from the pack. One thing that hasn't changed this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, is the number 1 place to bet touchdowns. Fade to the corner of the end zone. Running back breaks through the line and gallops 60 yards to score. We don't care how they get them. We just want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings is the best place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Tons of teams on bye in Week 14. Also tons of big spreads in the games we do get. There is at least one standout matchup on Sunday Night Football. Chargers in Kansas City. Chiefs are laying 4 points at home against Justin Herbert and company. That should be a super fun primetime game. Odds and lines are subject to change, but whichever game you bet, here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number 1 place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Welsh, what is your number 4 prediction?
Remember the Titans. We are going to go to the Titans, and we are going to go to Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is going to be our play for the week. I will say the spread's at like 3.5 right now. Kind of ugly. The total's at 39.5. I don't love hooks, but I like the Titans here. I think Levis is going to rebound. You can run against this team. You can pass against this team. And Mac Jones out there gives me no pause to want to bet against them. So on the Titans in general, I like the Titans as far as the spread goes. And going over to Calvin Ridley, it's a revenge narrative. So this is my revenge narrative one. I think he's going to go over 100. I think we're going to get a tutty in this one as well. The Jags are giving up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks over the last month and the third to wide receivers. That was going into this past week. So it's going to adjust a little bit now as of today when we add into week 13. But going into week 13, that's what it was. They had given up over 600 yards on 38 receptions. And that was key to me here. That's big plays. And Calvin Ridley, they were trying to get him the ball last week. Didn't work. I think it was 2 receptions for 45 yards. NWI for life, of course, but he's going to have more coverage. Calvin Ridley's going to get in on the main targets. It's revenge narrative. I think he's going to have 6-7 plus catches. I think he's going to go deep. And that's the thing that this offense gives up, as you can tell. 38 receptions to 600 yards over a 4-game span. That's how you can blow them out of the water. They're going to set it up early with Tony Pollard. Again, the updated version of that is the Jags over the last month are giving up the 4th most fantasy points to running backs. So Pollard's going to eat. Play action, Calvin Ridley. He will get the big force of targets. He's not going to put up a Jerry Jeudy type revenge game, but week 14 is revenge narratives, and Calvin Ridley should not be forgotten. 100 and a tutty. I also think Will Levis is going to push 250 with 2 scores in this. Some streaming quarterback action against a lowly Jaguars team.
What do you think here, Erickson? Calvin Ridley is ranked, fairly aggressively in the early rankings from Debro and Fitz. Will Levis is QB 15 early on here in the week for week 14. What do you think about these predictions from Welsh?
Yeah, it's a good spot. It would be really funny if Calvin Ridley broke Jerry Jeudy's record of the most receiving yards against your old team in less than a week.
Amazing. How cool would that be? That
would just be really funny. Calvin Ridley goes for like 250. I mean, he has the air yards to back it up. We just need to convert them into actual yards, and then we can get there for Calvin Ridley. I agree with everything. You got to sprinkle in some NWI touchdown because it's going to be 9 touchdowns in 9 games for NWI. I couldn't believe looking at some of his stats where Nick Westbrook-Akine, that's who we're talking about. Yes, he's deserved the hyphen because everyone needs to know who the king is, and it's NWI, Nick Westbrook-Akine. 40% of his catches this year have been touchdowns. He's caught 20 passes.
Wild.
8 touchdowns. and just looking at his yardage too, I think over the last 4 weeks where he's actually tied Calvin Ridley in terms of target share. The last 3 games, he is tied for the team lead in target share with 21%. He has 7 catches for 226 yards. So
it's crazy.
If Ridley could get 7 catches for 226 yards in this one game, he would match. He'd be just as good as Nick Westbrook-Akine. So yes, I do like the Ridley call here.
All right, Erickson, let's go to your number 3 prediction.
Alvin Kamara over on everything. His rushing.
I wanted this one so bad.
All of yards. It doesn't really matter. Alvin Kamara has been one of the guys that I definitely wasn't high enough because in the offseason, because I was worried about his age, worried about the touches, but it really just hasn't mattered. Like he's just been able to get it done. And as soon as the Saints start to introduce somebody else in their offense, that person immediately gets hurt. And then they have to go back. Well, I guess they're going back to AK-41. Like that's exactly what they have to do. They go back to Alvin Kamara. So he's averaged this season over 100 yards from scrimmage per game. I know that the touches are starting to pile up on him, but he's looked good. He's looked good enough at least. So again, you look at the matchup, the Giants, one of the worst defenses top to bottom in the NFL, whether it's against the deep ball. So MVS probably going to catch another long touchdown because that's just what he does. Alvin Kamara is going to go over 100 yards from scrimmage. I feel pretty confident about it. He's been going over that, like I said, on average matchups. And this is one of the best matchups against one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. And are the Saints really going to feature? I know obviously Juwan Johnson, but Jamal Williams. They've never given opportunities to Jamal Williams at all this year when they've had opportunities to take touches off of Alvin Kamara. I will say, though, that Coach Pick Index was talking up Kendre Miller, who I absolutely love. So I would love to see some Kendre Miller action in this game, assuming that he can get off IR from this phantom injury that Dennis Allen put him on IR for. So keep that in mind as you're doing waivers. Hey, Kendre Miller's out there. It's a good matchup against the Giants. Yeah, so got to keep that in mind. But yeah, I'm expecting big things from Kamara against Big Blue.
Yeah, Welsh, you obviously super agree with this. He's ranked, RB2 for the week. So obviously, a very clear start and everything. But we are just, couldn't be more all in on him for the week. The only running back ranked ahead of him is Saquon against Carolina, which obviously that makes sense. But Welsh, you're all aboard the Kamara train for this week.
Oh, yeah. There were two things I had on my brain that I wanted to put down, and Erickson got to the sheet before me and put them both down. This was the very first one. It's all Kamara. I'm waiting for the minute the props drop, and I'm going to bet it all. Rushing yards, receiving yards, total yards, rush attempts. If he could pass a touch, if he could throw for a touchdown, I would bet it at this point. It'll be all Alvin Kamara in this game. It's going to be volume. So I'm going to play it over. I don't know what they'll open at, but I want to play the over on it because this is a bad defense against running backs. Kamara gets all the volume, and Taysom Hill is gone. Taysom Hill's the guy that takes away what? That goal line equity. I'll do anytime touchdown with Kamara as well. It's going to take away some of those short yardage things when they wanted to put in the Wildcat, and even some of those short out yardage throws that they were doing where he was playing fullback and coming. All of that's gone. So this is just going to be nothing but Alvin Kamara in this game. So yeah, this is the best call of this show. It's just going to be nothing but the Alvin Kamara show.
The only line I've seen on any of the sites so far, and it's not DraftKings Sportsbook, so I won't name the site, is 78.5. So
over.
Easy over for
just rushing yards or total?
That's strictly rushing.
Yeah, I'll take the over. If they give me under 20 rush attempts, they give me under 80 rushing yards. Yes. They give me even 4.5 receptions. Yeah, I'll take the over. That's just what he's going to smash all of them this week. It's a great matchup.
What do you think? Well, before we get off this, I did mention, do you think Kendre Miller actually gets some run in this matchup?
Yeah, I think,
but he plays.
But like, what did Kamara have last? I think it was like 27 touches, wasn't it? Like 4 catch. I might have it. Maybe it was 6 catches and 21. It was like 27, 28 touches. Taysom Hill also did touch the ball. He ended up having 4 receptions. Like, I think, and I think it was a couple carries. I think like Kendre Miller actually would be the one that can take over some of that Taysom role, maybe a tiny bit more out of the running game. But this defense is bad enough that if you give me 15 Kamara carries, I think he's going to smash that over in the 70s. He's going to have the primary catches. He probably should lead the team in catches, even over my guy, Juwan Johnson. So yeah, I think Kendre Miller can do something, but it's not going to be fantasy relevant, I don't think. I think that would be more from a betting perspective. If you can go and get, Kendre Miller over whatever 12.5 rushing yards, like that's a fun one to take because he might get 5 or 6 carries, but we just don't have anything that tells us he's going to get some like primary role. And even Jonathan Brooks right now had 9 touches this past week. Wasn't fantasy relevant. It was just like out of desperation. I don't even think Kendre Miller's in desperation. Some guys, they have to prove it. We did that with Pacheco. We should do that with Miller, but don't be surprised, to Erickson's point, when Miller does get some run in this game after Kamara smashes everything.
Welsh, let's stick with you for your number 3 prediction.
Oh, I thought that was mine. I was like, what are we even talking about? What do I even have here? All right, I'm going to go to my 49ers, and I can't take the first one that I wanted to take because Erickson's going to do that here shortly, which I firmly agree with. But Erickson will attest to this. When I say it's Juwan Jennings week, it's Juwan Jennings week. I don't miss with Juwan Jennings. And ladies and gentlemen, it's Juwan Jennings week. We are going back. The Niners are lowly and disappointing, but Brock Purdy's there. Yes, there's no CMC, but they are going to learn how to play this week against the Browns, who have just fired their coach. And Juwan Jennings is going to be the one that eats. Juwan Jennings is going to be a wide receiver one this week, going over 5 catches, 80 yards, and a score. A stat in here, the Bears have given up 4 receiving touchdowns over the last 4 games. They've also been burned in 2 of those 4 games by the not number 1 wide receiver. And that's kind of important here because Debo still gets the coverage. He still gets the looks of the number 1 wide receiver. Those 2 games, wide receivers went over 100 yards against were Christian Watson and Jordan Addison, and not on a lot of receptions. And what is Juwan Jennings? He's the big, down the middle of the field guy. He gets separation. Brock Purdy loves him. He's probably going to get 8 to 10 targets in this game. He's going to find separation. They're also probably going to use Debo a little bit back in the running game now that they have nobody. So what I like about that is if you do have number one corners that are going to be paying attention to Debo, Debo's going to be coming more in line, and that's going to open up some of that separation. Kittle does it as well. It's a good Juwan Jennings week. We're not, it's no snowball, fingers crossed at this point, but it's just a messed Bears team, which maybe they'll have what do we call it? The dead coach bounce, like they just fired their coach. Now they got the other guys, not the dead cat, but maybe that's going to happen. And I do think the Bears in general, I haven't looked. I love the over in this game because you have the former, quarterback coordinator, offensive coordinator who's taking over. They're going to sling the ball. I mean, you can run against the 49ers. What can you do against the Niners, though? You can throw the ball. They got 3 viable receivers. I think they're going to unleash Caleb a little bit. Niners will play off a decent amount with their corners, which is going to help Caleb make quicker decisions. So I like the over in this game, Niners and Bears, but I like Juwan Jennings a lot, and I think he's going to break through.
Are you co-signing this, Erickson?
I mean, who am I to tell the Juwan Jennings soothsayer what's right and what's wrong? But I guess my only pushback is, but isn't Juwan Jennings the number one receiver on the 49ers? So
that's debatable from a coverage standpoint. I know what you're saying from a fantasy perspective. It's not close. Debo's trash.
I think that from a coverage standpoint, he is though. I mean, he's in the Brandon Ayuk role, correct? Like he's playing the X role in the offense, and isn't that what the Bears have taken away mostly this season? Like taking away a guy like Justin Jefferson and letting the other guys beat you. So that's the only thing that I disagree with you. Again, I agree Jennings is the best, like matchups aside, I don't care who they're playing, like who you're going to play this week, Jennings. And of course, I'm going to be ranking Jennings higher because I just haven't seen anything from Debo where you're like, yo, he's a great start this week. He just hasn't shown. I mean, besides all of his kickoff returns, right? He's basically doing nothing. So I push back on that, which is because the Bears have just been really good against number one wide receivers here. I think that Jennings is still kind of in that role. But yeah, I mean, I still understand that you want to buy the dip, I think, on the 49ers passing offense in general. They're playing at home. Again, the Bears, a defense and team that's kind of reeling right now. I think this game is going to be very interesting because you have a lot of different factors at play here. You have a new interim head coach for the Chicago Bears. You have Shanahan. How is he going to respond? No McCaffrey. A lot of moving pieces. So a game that I'm very much looking forward to kind of writing up in the Betting Bros Primer this week and kind of seeing kind of unfold.
Do you struggle to stay connected with friends and family who are far away, maybe missing someone this holiday season and looking to give a gift that keeps you a part of the festivities from afar? Since moving to Denver, I know I've missed out on being around my family back east, and I've wished I had a better way to stay connected to everyone. Well, now we've got the perfect gift. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. Upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in seconds. It's so easy to use. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. Even my technologically challenged parents can figure it out. Plus, you can invite friends and family to easily share photos via the free app. I love sharing photos of my dogs. My sister has a couple of kids. My parents love traveling to national parks. Now we can all share photos from our adventures together all in one place. And it only takes a tap on your phone to send your photos to a frame across the country. So it's an easy, fast way to keep loved ones in the loop and everyone more connected. And Skylight is so confident you'll love this frame. They offer free 120-day returns. And now, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/fantasy. That's skylightframe.com/fantasy. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/fantasy. Erickson, your number 2 prediction, please.
So going back to this 49ers Bears game that I talked up before in the ad read, I think that the Bears are going to cover the spread against the 49ers, but they're going to lose in the first game in the post Matt Eberflus era. And this is something that we talked about with trends when it comes to the Betting Pros Primer, where there's 2 massive trends that are going head to head here. So you have the dead cat bounce, or as Welsh likes to call it, the dead coach bounce. And Matt Eberflus, I believe, is still alive. He's fine. Like he's going to be okay. But you usually see teams rebound, especially against the spread after they fire their head coach, especially with Eberflus. And it just seemed like he had lost the locker room seemingly months ago. So you definitely expect to see a response from Chicago here. But to what extent to actually go on the road and then beat the 49ers, I still think is a lot to ask for, especially after they played the Lions. And this has been the other trend. It's called the Honolulu flu, essentially, where teams that play against the Lions the next week, no team has covered the spread. The actually only team that's actually done it was the Jaguars last week, and that was after they had a bye week before playing the Lions. So maybe it counts, maybe it doesn't. And I don't know how the Jaguars covered against the Texans when Trevor Lawrence didn't even play half the game and they still found a way to cover the spread. So I think that's more of a Texans issue than anything else. So I do think this game is close. So maybe we do get an over like Welsh kind of projected because it's a little bit more back and forth. But my prop that I really want to focus in on here is the hot waiver wire topic of the week, the player that everyone's going to be kind of blowing the fab on is Isaac Guerendo. So I think that the rookie running back, again, we've seen him flash already this year with Christian McCaffrey out when Jordan Mason was a little bit banged up. He's a speed back. He's got elite speed, elite size. So I think that he's going to have a monster game. I put his projection, his rushing prop at like 60 yards. I don't think it's going to get nearly as high as what we saw with like McCaffrey and Jordan Mason, but just take a step back. 49ers RB1. That's all I really think about when I'm looking at Guerendo. He's got the size, he's got the speed, and the matchup is there. Like the Bears' weakest point, again, talked about how their pass defense is pretty good. Their run defense is horrible. Again, allowed 11 of the last 12 running backs they have faced to go over their rushing yards projection. So I think the books, props, whatever you're looking at, it's going to be probably low on Guerendo than it should be. And I think that he's a confident start across the board. So if you pick him up off waivers, you're starting him this week. I really am not concerned about, well, what if they get Patrick Taylor involved? Like, he'll have a role, but I think that the 49ers have all the incentive based on the fact that they're not going to make the playoffs this year to look at Guerendo because, and Welsh, maybe you can shed some light on this. Mason, I believe, is a free agent next year. Elijah Mitchell, I believe, is a free agent next year. And this is part of the reason why they drafted all of these running backs in this draft, because they wanted to look at, hey, with McCaffrey, who's going to be the backup of the future? Mitchell obviously has struggled to stay healthy. Mason played well before he got hurt. So I think they're wanting an extended look at Guerendo. I think you're going to see it here in week 14 in a plus matchup against the Bears.
Welsh?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even extended look. If there's no one else, like he has got to be the guy. I think that played into a role in that small little period on Monday where we were sitting around thinking, oh, Jordan Mason, it's the play of the year and blah, blah, blah. And maybe they'll get Guerendo in there. And then it's like, oh, no, by the way, he has a high ankle sprain, so they're all gone. So, yeah, but I agree. They like Guerendo. I love this play. This was the other one. I started to write up and I was like, Erickson, you got this one. Come on. But I completely agree. He plays multifaceted too. I think he had a receiving touchdown the week before, which so they can play him out of the receiving side, which they really didn't like to do with Jordan Mason a ton. He can play between and outside the tackles. Speed kind of reminds me of Raheem Mostert, to be honest with you. The old Raheem Mostert would just like put up, one of the fastest sprint speeds, full length field runs. And he's kind of in that same vein. Not having Trent Williams most likely this week, dealing with the personal tragedy and he had injuries. If he's not there, that does adjust the line a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think this is a Guerendo play across the board. I love the Jordan Mason touchdown on the Out of Bounds show that we do. I'll turn that over to Guerendo. I think he's going to be able to put that in. I don't know what Debo's rushing role will be. I think it might be a little bit more than significant. But I think the key here is whatever, this is kind of like the Kamara one, whatever they open Guerendo up at is probably going to be too low. And if it's like 1.5 receptions, I'm probably going to want to play that. And if it's anything under 50 yards, it's probably going to be a smash from the betting perspective. And everywhere that I can, I'm unloading my fab. Every single spot. I'm spending every dollar in the flex leagues on Guerendo. I don't know why I can't currently put my bid in FFPC on Guerendo. He's available in both, but I'm going to whenever it lets me. So he's the guy that you unload the fab on and you start him this week because they really don't have a ton of other running backs. But also small shout out to paying attention to what Debo's rushing yard number is going to be. It was like 6.5 last week. If it's under 15, that also might be a really good bet because Niners are not going to just move away from the run because they're all down. No, they're going to still run. They're just going to be more creative about it. Also, why I just like Juwan Jennings being out, as far as the receiving side, even more than Debo, because Debo might be playing way more behind the line of scrimmage than we know. But Guerendo's a fantastic play, and I know you guys are going to have a ton of fantasy questions on him throughout the week.
Erickson, how much of your fab, whatever you have remaining, would you spend on Guerendo?
If I had any fab left, I would
All
spend
of it.
it all.
100.
I had
Yeah,
58. I had 58 left in flex. I'm unloading all 58.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that's what most people will do too. I just wanted to mention it because we didn't have the Jordan Mason information when we did the waiver wire show yesterday that we put out. So just for those who are hearing this before waivers run, like just to clarify what I think is obvious, put it all on Guerendo.
Yeah, I mean, this is the classic 49ers running back. He fits the scheme. He's fast. He's big. He can run, and he's fresh, right? I mean, he hasn't taken on I mean, we saw Jordan Mason just like the touches eventually like wore him out, and he wasn't able to sustain the rest of the season. He was dealing with injuries. So, I mean, this guy's fresh, and I mean, the 49ers have nothing else to play for. Like, hey, maybe this guy can be our running back to be used in the future because all the other running backs are hurt. So, Isaac Guerendo season is full go.
Welsh, what's your number 2 prediction?
All right, we're gonna go. We're actually gonna go back to that Giants game, that Giants and Saints game, and we're gonna go on the other side though. We're gonna pick a Giant. It is Tyrone Tracy season. The Tracy, not season. That messed me up a little bit. But Tyrone Tracy, week 14, top 10 RB. Tracy, this is a fun one. Tracy, when scoring a touchdown, has been a top 10 running back 3 of the 4 times he has scored a touchdown so far. So, I mean, 75% of the time, if you get 1 touchdown from him, he's putting up a top 10 half PPR RB performance. So, the Saints, they have given up a touchdown to running backs in 8 of their last 10 games, and 5 of those 8 have been multi-touchdown games to running backs. The Giants don't have much. They do have Tyrone Tracy. You do worry about Devin Singletary a little bit, but I think this is a really good spot for Tyrone Tracy to eat, get those carries back up. I think it's been 2 straight weeks of like 9. They can be involved in this game a tiny bit more. This game will probably be played on the ground, as we've kind of predicted with like Kamara, and Tracy will do the same, catching out of the backfield. I really like Tyrone Tracy in this standpoint. And as I said, if he scores a touchdown, 3 out of 4 chance that it's going to be, at least at this point, a top 10 RB performance. So I'm all on the Tyrone Tracy Jr. bandwagon.
I was kind of surprised with his ranking in ECR. It's still early in the week, so it's likely to change, but he's RB 16 right now. I just think that's too low, Erickson. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably just like a overlapping from last week where there was some hesitancy about was he going to get benched? And technically, he didn't start the game. Like Devin Singletary started, and there was like, oh no, did he get benched? And then he obviously took over after that. So it was like, hey, we're fine. Tyrone Tracy, we're good. So yeah, so it's weird that we are investing so much in this Giants Saints game, which screams like
a little worrisome. It's going to be a 7-2 game.
If you follow MetLife Stadium at all, it's a game. It's a stadium of just disappointments. Like that's basically what it is. So proceed with caution here, but. Yeah, it's hard to argue with Tracy when he's played. Again, it's a good matchup against the Saints run defense. So, again, someone's going to pop in this game. Maybe they all don't hit, but yeah, we'll see how it works.
We're giving all the options in that game. That singular game.
Yeah. All right, we've got one prediction each left. Erickson, what's your number 1 prediction for this week?
Chase Brown, top 5 running back season. Here we go. I didn't in my wildest dreams, I think, expect Chase Brown to be ranked this high and have such an elite role in this offense, but ever since Zach Moss kind of finally went down, Chase Brown has basically had one of the best roles in fantasy football among all players. He played 81% of the snaps last week. So he has an elite role. He's gone over 100 yards from scrimmage in 4 straight games, 90 yards from scrimmage in 4 straight games. So I think he's going to continue that. I think he's going to go over 90 scrimmage yards again against facing the Dallas Cowboys. Again, another great matchup for him. And it's not one of these things where, when a player is seeing so much volume that, oh, well, they're not explosive, right? So they're not going to be able to rip off. I mean, that's the complete opposite with Chase Brown. He's combining his explosiveness with an elite workload because the Bengals are giving no other running back opportunities. We thought, okay, maybe out of the bye week, maybe they Khalil Herbert a little bit more involved. Couldn't be farther from the case, right? They want no one else touching the ball except Chase Brown. The only thing that concerns me about Chase Brown rest of the season is just the Bengals just kind of giving up because we know that they're not going to make the playoffs, but up until that point, we haven't shown us that, hey, their offense wants to score 30 points per game. They're going to be able to do that against Dallas, and Chase Brown is going to be a huge part of it. So I believe in ECR this week, he is a top 5 running back. I would argue that he's a fringe top 5 fantasy running back rest of season, just based on this role that is kind of unmatched compared to other running backs. So, I mean, he's an elite running back rest of the season. So very excited about Chase Brown, especially against Dallas this week. And I think that his role is going to hold the rest of the way, probably.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that Alvin Kamara is RB2 on the week behind only Saquon. In our staff rankings, Chase Brown is RB3. And if you look at standard, not half PPR, he is RB2. So literally outside of Saquon Barkley and maybe Alvin Kamara, there's nobody we would rather have this week than Chase Brown, and just, a primo matchup against Dallas. Welsh, where do you have Chase Brown ranked? I mean, I assume kind of similarly aggressively.
Yeah, I'm going to co-sign this. I'm still doing, Tuesday, I'm still working through my ranks, but he's going to be in the top 5. Dallas defense, garbage. And I love this. It was as you were talking, it was hearkening back to all those early preseason week 1, week 2 things where we were like, Rico Dowdle or Chase Brown? We were just having all these debates of like, where can we sit on Chase Brown? And the thing that is here, like you're talking about, where we can be so comfortable is the usage. He's there is no, as much as I like Tyrone Tracy, like Devin Singletary is still looming around. There's just nobody looming around. Chase Brown has completely taken this team over. They are playing kind of in a passing role a lot, but he is heavily involved in the passing side for the Bengals. So I love Chase Brown. I think his floor is super high. His ceiling is super high. I'm not surprised that he's ranking at this level. And I think he's kind of like a no-brainer top 5, top 6 RB this week. So he is most likely going to be the answer to whatever question you put him in. I can't foresee, and legit, unless you're like Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara and him, like, okay, then I'm not going to answer.
Technically, you could have those 3 running backs on your team and 2 running
that's
backs,
what I'm saying.
flex.
That would be when I say don't go Chase Brown. But yeah, that other than that, he will be the answer to your question this week.
If I gave you a line of 72.5 rushing yards only, would you go over or under?
Over. You get that on one play.
He's only done that 3 times this season, for the record.
How many times happened in the last 4 weeks?
Twice. 2 of the 3 times were in the last 4 weeks.
50%. It's already hitting at 50%. Then I get.
He also was at 70 yards in one of the games he didn't make it, so he was really close in the last game, against Pittsburgh, obviously.
I feel like I'm going to want to bet scrimmage yards if I'm betting on Chase Brown this week. Like, he could also have like 60 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, and 35 yards receiving or something like that, and be a really huge fantasy asset. Because I don't know which way this game could go. I guess if I had to pick one, I'm going to go with the over because of the usage, but I probably would play scrimmage yards, which my hope would be if it's 70 rushing yards, maybe it's like 90 something, like 90 total yards, maybe even in the 85s, but that's what I would play.
Well, yeah, 90 has been over 4 straight games.
Yeah. Just receiving only the last 4 games, 37, 52, 57, 30 for the receiving yardage. So that's been like a decent chunk of it, even though when he's also producing on the ground as well. So yeah, really excited about Chase Brown. This was the best case scenario if you were investing in him in August. Welsh, what is your number 1 prediction for week 14?
All right, I got a big guy, but Justin Jefferson is going to break the bad streak. Justin Jefferson has only been a wide receiver 2 1 of the last 4 games. So 3 of those 4, he has failed to even put up wide receiver 2 numbers. He has also failed to get 100 yards. Technically, he did have 99 this past week, but he's failed to go over 100 yards 4 straight weeks. That ends this week as Justin Jefferson is going to go over 100. We might get 2 touchdowns. If I was playing, I would say a touchdown, but bold predictions, I'd put 2 touchdowns in there for Justin Jefferson. Falcons have been giving up the most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last month going into week 13. 6 touchdowns over those 4 games to wide receivers alone. It's a big name, but we've talked about Kamara. We've talked about Chase Brown. Justin Jefferson bouncing back. This is going to be the week where we have that big blow up Justin Jefferson game, well over 100. I'm taking the over on yards, which I suspect will probably be in the 80s. I will take the over in receptions, which I'm going to guess is probably going to open up around 5.5, even 6.5. I might be comfortable with if it's plus money. And I like the anytime touchdown. I like all the bets on Justin Jefferson, just like I do with Kamara.
Welsh, I don't know if you noticed this when you were, prepping your stats for this. Do you know how many games this season? He's played 12 games. How many times Justin Jefferson has double-digit targets this season?
Oh, was it twice?
Erickson, do you have a guess?
3 times.
Once.
Oh.
He had 14 targets in week 5 against the Jets. No other times has he had double digits. It's 6, 7, 8, 8, 8, 9, 9, 9, 8, 5, 9 are the other
this week
totals.
He makes it 2 times.
I hope so. That would be. It's a little under the radar that he's been struggling because it's not like he's been giving zeros. Like in those games where he's not been inside the top 24, he's been wide receiver 33 or wide receiver 29. So they haven't been like complete negative, like totally ruin your week. But it has been a month straight of not performing at the level we expect out of Justin Jefferson. So I think
here's a question. Erickson, we'll do this for you because I know Worm is probably looking at the game log. How many times has Justin Jefferson this year in half PPR ranked inside the top 12 wide receivers? So a wide receiver 1. How many times?
Twice.
A little bit more, only 4 times. So maybe that seems like a lot or not. But for a guy that was being taken as a top 2 or 3 overall receiver, he's only finished inside the top 12 4 times all season. He does have some other teams, but this 4-week stretch has been his absolute worst. But he's going to step up big for playoff.
4 times all season, and 3 of those times were in the first 6 games. So it's, recently it's been worse. The other thing too is he doesn't have a top 5 finish this season in half PPR. Not one.
Yeah, good call.
Really surprising.
I do like this call, Welsh, because I think that this is where, he's been underwhelming. This is where the planets align, right? Because he's playing the Falcons, right? Like this has been the matchup just historically where wide receivers that struggle just blow up. And it doesn't matter. Again, they have AJ Terrell. He's one of the most overrated number 1 corners. It's like, yeah, please put AJ Terrell on Justin Jefferson. The Falcons are going to have no answers for Justin Jefferson. And something that I want to bring up too, and we don't have any news about this, keep an eye on Jordan Addison. I don't know if that he has his hearing today for his DUI that he had in the summer. If he misses games, this is the avenue where, hey, remember when we can get Justin Jefferson to double-digit targets? That's more likely if there is no Addison, potentially. So something to kind of monitor leading up to the week. But yes, I think Jefferson is set up here for a big game. Look, Welsh, so we've talked a lot about the Giants-Saints game. We talked about the Falcons and Vikings game. Which game scores more points? Because if my game is shooting out and the Giants and Saints is kind of meh, how is Juwan Johnson going to outscore Kyle Pitts? Please tell me that.
Well, Kyle Pitts doesn't get targets. They could score 70 points, and he's not involved in the game.
If the Vikings score 30 points, I can guarantee Kyle Pitts is going to outscore Juwan Johnson.
I want to be with you. I love you. I love you. You're my podcast.
I'm trying to use logic here to battle this.
But there is no logic to Kyle Pitts. You are using logic to something that is illogical. Kyle Pitts, they could score 50 points and Kyle Pitts could see 1 target the whole game. Maybe he has a game, the stars align and and everything happens and crazy and Mercury retrograde. I don't know. It could happen, but it's not gonna because it never happens. Worm, what was that stat again? 2 receptions
outside of the New Orleans game. He has 2 receptions since his blow up against Tampa.
Jennings had Juwan. I'm always there's too many Juwan. Juwan Johnson had more targets and had 5 catches. He had 1 less catch last week than Kyle Pitts had since week 8. There's a stat.
What happened the last time Kyle Pitts went catchless? What did he do the next week? They fed him. They fed him, dude. They fed him.
This is really a great first step forward for this year's iteration of the predictions show. We're just spending all the time on the Saints, on Kyle Pitts, on the Giants. What an exciting slate we're talking
I've never wanted
about
someone
here.
to fail more than Kyle Pitts this year. Great guy, great athlete.
On that note, we'll wrap up. Hope everybody enjoyed that. This is what the format will be for the rest of the season here, last handful of weeks. So I hope everybody enjoyed. We'll be back again next week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. For Welsh and Erickson, I'm Ryan. We'll see you again next time.